to the assembled devotee. All glories to the lotus feet of Sri Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Sri Prabhupada. Okay, welcome everyone to today's Srimad Bhagavatam session. We are in the second canto, first chapter. Today's verse is number 10. And let me share the screen here. Okay. Everyone can see the screen, yes?
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Tadaham te vidasyami mahapaurushiko bhavan yasya shraddha tatam ashu syanmukunde mati sati. Tadaham te vidasyami mahapaurushiko bhavan yasya shraddha dhatam ashu syanmukunde mati sati. Tad aham te vidhasyami mahapaurushiko bhavan yasya shraddha dhatam ashu syanmukunde mati sati. Please chant.
Tadaham te vidhasyami mahapaurusiko bhavan yasya shraddha dhatamasu syanmukunde mati sati.
Tadaham te vidhasyami mahapaurushiko bhavan yasya shraddha dhatam asau syanmukunde mati sati.
Anyone else?
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Tad aham te vidasyami mahapaurushiko bhavan yasya shraddha datam aso sayanamukunde matihi sati. Hare Krishna. Okay.
Okay. Tat, that. Aham, I. Te, unto you. Abhidhasyami, shall recite. Maha Paurushikaha, the most sincere devotee of Lord Krishna. Bhavan, your good self. Yasya, of which. Shraddhadhatam, one who gives full respect and attention. Ashu, very soon. Syat, it so becomes. Mukunde, unto the Lord who awards salvation. Matahi, faith. Sati, unflinching. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. Translation. That very Srimad Bhagavatam I shall recite before you, because you are the most sincere devotee of Lord Krishna, one who gives full attention and respect to hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, achieves unflinching faith in the Supreme Lord, the giver of salvation. Purport. Srimad Bhagavatam is recognized Vedic wisdom, and the system of receiving Vedic knowledge is called Avaroha Panta, or the process of receiving transcendental knowledge through bona fide disciplic succession. For advancement of material knowledge, there is a need for personal ability and researching aptitude. But in the case of spiritual knowledge, all progress depends more or less on the mercy of the spiritual master. The spiritual master must be satisfied with the disciple. Only then is knowledge automatically manifest before the student of spiritual science. The process should not, however, be misunderstood to be something like magical feats, whereby the spiritual master acts like a magician and injects spiritual knowledge into his disciple as if surcharging him with an electrical current. The bona fide spiritual master reasonably explains everything to the disciple on the authorities of Vedic wisdom. The disciple can receive such teachings not exactly intellectually, but by submissive inquiries and a service attitude. The idea is that both the spiritual master and the disciple must be bona fide. In this case, the spiritual master, Shukadev Goswami, is ready to recite exactly what he has learned from his great father, Srila Vyasadeva. And as the disciple, Maharaj Parikshit is a great devotee of Lord Krishna. A devotee of Lord Krishna is he who believes sincerely that by becoming a devotee of the Lord, one becomes fully equipped with everything spiritual. This teaching is imparted by the Lord himself in the pages of Bhagavad Gita, in which it is clearly described that the Lord, Sri Krishna, is everything, and that to surrender unto him solely and wholly makes one the most perfectly pious man. This unflinching faith in Lord Krishna prepares one to become a student of Srimad Bhagavatam. And one who hears Srimad Bhagavatam from a devotee like Shukadev Goswami is sure to attain salvation at the end, as Maharaj Parikshit did. The professional reciter of Srimad Bhagavatam and the pseudo devotees whose faith is based on 1 week's hearing are different from Shukadev Goswami and Maharaj Parikshit. Srila Vyasadeva explained Srimad Bhagavatam unto Shukadev Goswami from the very beginning of the Janmadhyasya verse, and so Shukadev Goswami also explained it to the king. Lord Krishna is described as the Mahapurusha in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 11, in his devotional feature as Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Lord Krishna himself in his devotional attitude, descended to the earth to bestow special favors upon the fallen souls of this age of Kali. There are 2 verses particularly suitable to offer as prayers to this Mahapurush feature of Lord Krishna. Gyayam sada paribhava gnan abhishta doham tirtas padam shiva virinchi nutam sharanyam prityat Brityartiham Panatapala Pavabdi Potam Vande Mahapurushate Charana Ravindam Tyaktva Suduspyaja Surepsita Rajya Lakshmin Dharmishta Arya Vachasa Yad Agad Aranyam Maya Mrigang Dai Taye Sitam Anvadevad Vande Mahapurushate Charana Ravindam. That was Srimad Bhagavatam, 11th canto, 5th chapter, verses 33 and 34. In other words, Purusha means the enjoyer, and Mahapurusha means the supreme enjoyer, or the supreme personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. One who deserves to approach the Supreme Lord Krishna is called Mahapurushika. Anyone who hears Srimad Bhagavatam attentively from its bona fide reciter is sure to become a sincere devotee of the Lord, who is able to award liberation. There was none so attentive as Maharaj Parikshit in the matter of hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, and there was none so qualified as Shukadev Goswami to recite the text of Srimad Bhagavatam. Therefore, anyone who follows in the footsteps of either the ideal reciter or the ideal hearer, Shukadev Goswami and Maharaj Parikshit, respectively, will undoubtedly attain salvation like them. Maharaj Parikshit attained salvation by hearing only, and Shukadev Goswami attained salvation only by reciting. Reciting and hearing are two processes out of 9 devotional activities, and by strenuously following the principles, either in all or by parts, one can attain the absolute plane. So the complete text of Srimad Bhagavatam, beginning with the Janmadhyasya verse up to the last one in the 12th canto, was spoken by Shukadev Goswami for the attainment of salvation by Maharaj Parikshit. In the Padma Purana, it is mentioned that Gautama Muni advised Maharaj Ambarish to hear regularly Srimad Bhagavatam as it was recited by Shukadev Goswami. And herein, it is confirmed that Maharaj Ambarish heard Srimad Bhagavatam from the very beginning to the end, as it was spoken by Shukadev Goswami. One who is actually interested in the Bhagavatam, therefore, must not play with it by reading or hearing a portion from here and a portion from there. One must follow in the footsteps of great kings like Maharaj Ambarish or Maharaj Parikshit and hear it from a bona fide representative of Shukadev Goswami. Sorry, computer sometimes does this. So the verse again. That very Srimad Bhagavatam I shall recite before you, because you are the most sincere devotee of Lord Krishna. One who gives full attention and respect to hearing Srimad Bhagavatam achieves unflinching faith in the Supreme Lord, the giver of salvation. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namre. Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravani Vicharne Nirvishesha Shungi Vadi Krishatu Deshatuni. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Vanchakalpatrubhya Chakrapa Sindhubhya Eva Chaktipanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna. So as it turns out, today again, we're talking about the qualification of both the listener, or the disciple, and the speaker, or the guru. And again, it is mentioned what the appropriate transactions are within that relationship, and most importantly, the mood. mood that one has to have when interacting in that relationship. So 2 weeks ago, I covered this exact same subject, but today we're going to go a little deeper with it, right? So we already covered why these things are important, why it's important for the guru and the disciple both to be qualified and what those qualifications are. But today we're going to focus a little more on how to properly apply these in our daily lives. So less about the why today and more about the how. But first, I'll just do a quick summary for those who may have missed the class a couple of weeks ago, or sometimes it's always just nice to have a reminder. So a couple of weeks ago, Maharaj Parikshit asked the question of Srimad Bhagavatam, is that what is the way of perfection for a man who is about to die, especially for a man who's about to die, but also for anyone in general. And so we talked about how everything about that transaction was perfect. The circumstance was perfect for this instruction because of providence, because of Krishna's interjection. Maharaj Parikshit acted out of the ordinary. He did something that he wouldn't normally do. And because of that action, he was cursed by an immature Brahmana. So he understood that what was going on was a matter of fate. It wasn't something that he should try to fight or counteract. He understood, okay, this is what's happening. I am to die in a week. Now I should just completely focus on Krishna. So he finds someone who can tell him all about Krishna and his pastimes and how to perfect one's life, what the way of perfection for all persons, right? So the circumstance is perfect. It's not a casual circumstance. It's not, we talked about that a couple of weeks ago. It's not like a formal but not very serious. It's a perfect circumstance to have this conversation, because it's an important conversation to have, right? Everyone needs to have it, but it has to be done in the right mood, the right circumstances have to be there, and the right people. So the circumstance was perfect. The inquirer, the speaker, and the audience, they were all perfect, right? The inquirer, he is sincerely curious about the subject matter. He wants to know it, and he's also qualified in all the ways that a hearer can be qualified. The speaker is qualified. He's heard it from an authorized source, and he's repeating it without giving his own interpretations. Right? And the audience was also perfect, right? So all these great sages and demigods all show up because they understand, okay, the Bhagavat Purana is about to be spoken and we want to hear this, right? They want to, so they're attentive. They're not interrupting, they're not interjecting, they're not making side remarks, they're not doing anything like that. It's a perfect audience. Now it can be noted that when Shukadeva Goswami first showed up, he's naked basically. He's completely transcendental, so he's not concerned with externals. So as he was walking to the place, there were actually some people that were following him. They were curious, like, what is this fellow doing? This guy, he's walking around naked. He's not really interacting with people. He's just sort of, going somewhere, and they're sort of jesting and trying to figure out what's going on. But as soon as they see the crowd of assembled sages and they realize, oh, this is some serious business going on, and so then they disperse. So all that's left is those who are serious and sincere to hear Srimad Bhagavatam. So the circumstance, perfect. The inquirer, the speaker, and the audience, they're all perfect. Then the subject matter. It's not only the perfect subject matter, but it's also the thesis of the entire Srimad Bhagavatam. What is the way of perfection for all beings, especially for one who is about to die, right? So, and all of that was pointed out in the verse 2 weeks ago. Then we talked about how the verse from 2 weeks ago had a lot of parallel themes as a verse in Bhagavad Gita. Does anyone want to? Does anyone remember which verse from Bhagavad Gita we quoted a couple of weeks ago that had the same themes? about the relationship and the qualification of the guru and the disciple, and the proper interactions and the proper mood that is to be followed. We have a shy group today. So it was Bhagavad Gita 434. And today, in today's purport, we also have this, Srila Prabhupada mentions this verse. Find where it is. So first it says, there we are, the bona fide spiritual master reasonably explains everything to the disciple on the authorities of Vedic wisdom, right? Spiritual master has seen the truth, therefore he can reveal it. And then the disciple can receive such teachings, not exactly intellectually, but by submissive inquiries and a service attitude, right? So this is Srila Prabhupada paraphrasing Bhagavad Gita 434. So that brings us to today. Now, one thing I'll say before we begin that is Srila Prabhupada makes sure to make it clear that it's not by intellectual prowess or capability or capacity that one receives transcendental knowledge. So if we think that one has to be a scholar or an intellectual in order to understand the absolute truth, then that is a misunderstanding. Because this comes through submissive inquiries and service attitude, right? And anyone can do that. One doesn't need to be a scholar or an intellectual to be submissive in asking a question and to having an appreciative and a service attitude toward the speaker. And the speaker also doesn't have to be an intellectual, doesn't have to be a scholar. They simply have to have heard from an authorized source, and they repeat it without changing anything. So it said, the bona fide spiritual master reasonably explains everything to the disciple on the authorities of Vedic wisdom. So he got the wisdom from the Vedas, and then he's just explaining them reasonably. And so this is the relationship between the guru and the disciple. So today I said that we were going to talk about how to properly apply these things, right? So we just summarized why they're important, why it's important for the speaker and the listener to both be qualified, what is the appropriate relationship, and most importantly, what is the mood that should be there. So how to properly apply these. So the first thing I want to do is I want to give an example of how one is tested by Krishna to gauge the qualification of whether one's a proper hearer, a proper recipient of transcendental knowledge. And then also the result of that. Once one is deemed qualified enough to become a listener, what the result is of that. So for this, I'm actually going to give a personal example. Some of you have heard this story, and I apologize if it's, sorry, I need to, I apologize if it's repetitive, but early on, when I met the devotees, I wanted to study Shastra. And so in 1995, I went to Vrindavan to study Bhakti Shastri. And after I finished studying Bhakti Shastri, naturally I wanted to study Srimad Bhagavatam, right? Because that's the natural next step. Bhagavad Gita teaches us that we are to surrender to Krishna. And then of course, Upadekshamrita, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, and Shriyas Upanishad, they further that conviction that we should surrender to Krishna. There's no other way. Everything belongs to Krishna. And so if we are to take our appropriate place in this world, we should surrender unto him. So the next step is logically to study Srimad Bhagavatam, because Srimad Bhagavatam now teaches us how to surrender to Krishna. So first we become convinced that we should surrender to Krishna, and then we understand how to. And while we're understanding how to, by studying Srimad Bhagavatam, we're also getting a glimpse of Krishna's personality in his different incarnations, his different expansions, the different ways he deals and reciprocates with his various devotees. And we naturally develop this affection for him because he is the supreme person. Everything he does is perfect and poetic and beautiful, right? So we learn how to surrender to him, and we also just naturally want to surrender to him when we study Srimad Bhagavatam. But as many aspiring devotees share in this issue, we may have the intention to study Srimad Bhagavatam, but it doesn't always go the way we plan. You know, so sometimes, for example, we'll join study groups, right? We'll get a group of devotees to come together, and we'll pick a day that works for all of us, and we'll come and decide, okay, we're going to study Srimad Bhagavatam. And sometimes that works for a little while, sometimes it doesn't. Other times, we come up with these different ideas. Oh, another popular one is Vaisheshika Prabhu put out this list. I think it's called Page by Page Be a Sage, something like that, or Become a Sage Page by Page. And he basically made a chart, a table, and it shows in the different scriptures how many verses there are, and how many verses you have to read each day in order to finish that piece of work in a certain amount of time. So if you want to finish it in a year, then you read, this many verses. If you want to finish it, however, So sometimes then we do this. We make it our New Year's resolution, for example. And we say, okay, this year I'm going to read Bhagavatam, so I'm going to stick to this program, and I'm going to read this many, pages, not verses. Read this many pages of Bhagavatam per day. And sometimes those things fall through, right? And so I also had this problem where I would try over and over different ways to study Srimad Bhagavatam, but somehow it never stuck. I wasn't sincere enough, is what it came down to. But there are so many different excuses that we can come up with. We'll blame it on, the people who were supposed to come together and study with us, or we'll blame it on our work schedule, or we'll blame it on whatever. We come up with so many different excuses, but when it all comes down to it, it's where our sincerity is, right? If we're sincere about it, we'll actually make it happen. So after years of trying and starting and not finishing, trying, going, and I started studying the first canto so many times in basically it was 10 years. So many times, and I was serious about it. I had these notebooks, and the way I study Shastra is when I go through the verses, first I'll go through the chapter and I will write every verse down, because when you write something, not just reading it, it's like reading it 3 or 4 times. You really understand. You're paying attention. You're forced to pay attention to it. You can't just gloss over it. And so I started doing that so many times, where I'd write down the first couple chapters of Srimad Bhagavatam, and I'd start getting into it, and then something would come up. So finally, fast forward about 10 years, to 2005. And at that point in my life, I had a job that was just for the summertime. It was a 6-month job, seasonal. And so for the winter and fall, I had free time. I could do basically whatever I wanted. And it just so happened that very year, Vrindavan was offering the Bhakti Vaibhava course, which is the course where you start studying the first half of Srimad Bhagavatam. And so I said, okay, I'm going to take advantage of this opportunity. So I scheduled, okay, I'm going to go, I'm going to do this course. I also scheduled, so the job I was doing at the time, I was the seasonal job. I was living in a tourist town, and I was doing art for tourists. Basically, whatever sort of art they wanted, I would do for them. And so, since I had this 6 months off, and since the Bhakti Vaibhav was just a 4-month course, I also had a little bit of time. So I also booked another course So the Bhakti Vaibhav was obviously to cultivate my spiritual life. And then I also booked another course to help cultivate my material life. It was an artist retreat where a bunch of artists get together, and there are also master artists there at the retreat, and they teach all of the other artists there, basic, some tricks and tips to become better artists. So to help cultivate your art, right? So I wanted to cultivate my spiritual side, but then I also figured, okay, I'll also cultivate this because I do it as a job. I should, probably take it seriously. So I had these two courses booked, right? And so, by nature, I'm a planner. So I always plan ahead. So, passport, visa, plane tickets, all the details of what's going to happen when. I had it all worked out. Now, a week before I was to fly to India to go and take the Bhakti Vaibhav course, I got an email from the course facilitator that the course was actually canceled. Sorry, we're not going to hold Bhakti Vaibhav this year. And I was thinking, well, hey, man, I already paid for the course. I already have my plane ticket to come to the course. You can't just cancel it. And so I was very upset about that. But they said, but don't worry, because they're offering the same course in Mayapur. So you just go to Mayapur instead. You take the course there. But you're going to miss some of it because they started early. So then I was really upset because not only did they wait till the last minute to tell me, but now they're sending me somewhere else. I'm going to be late. And another thing about me is that I don't like being late. I'm actually usually quite early to things. When I went to take Bhakti Shastri, I showed up a month early, partly because the plane ticket was way cheaper a month earlier in the summertime. But also I wanted to, get that mood of Vrindavan before jumping into studying Shah. I didn't want to show up at the last minute. So everything about the situation was challenging me to actually, my nature would be to just drop the whole thing. Say, forget about it. I'm not going to do it. There's too many things have changed. I'm going to miss part of the course. I'm going somewhere that, I didn't plan on. My nature would have been to just drop it, say, okay, better, maybe next year it'll work out. But somehow I had just barely enough sincerity to go ahead and do it. Now, this is also partially due, or mostly due, to my conditioning. My current material conditioning in this particular body is mostly German. And Germans are known for being, the word varies depending on what your mood is. You can either say determined or you can say stubborn, depending on if you like what the person's doing, then you say, oh, they're very determined. No matter what, against all odds, they will persevere against all odds and meet their goal. Or you can say stubborn, is if you don't like what the person's doing, you're saying, oh, he's so pig-headed and stubborn that he doesn't know that he should, give up, stop. So it's actually the same thing. It's the same. It's stubborn and determined. It's the same coin, but it's just the two sides of the different coin. But the beauty of Krishna consciousness is that it doesn't matter which side of the coin you're on, if you're on the favorable side or the unfavorable side. If somehow you engage that in Krishna service, whether you're stubborn or determined, if somehow you have the smallest drop of sincerity in your stubbornness or determination, Krishna will see that, he will fan that spark, and amazing things can come of it. So because I had that tiny drop of sincerity, which again was mostly my stubbornness to not quit something, Krishna then fanned that spark and then allowed me to become, or he deemed me at least partially qualified to be a hearer of Srimad Bhagavatam, right? Because that was there. Now, as a result of that, when we study Srimad Bhagavatam, and actually study, So here we're having Srimad Bhagavatam class. This is a regular thing. This is an essential part of the morning program. And you can certainly take away so many valuable things from it. But this isn't what you would call studying Srimad Bhagavatam, right? There's a different mood there. I mean, at this rate, if you're talking about going through one verse a day, and you know, sometimes more than one verse is covered, but essentially, if you're going through one verse a day, 18,000 verses, 365 days a year, that's 40 years and 4 months that it would take, a little less actually, to get through the Srimad Bhagavatam. So it's not necessarily a study. Now, like I said, you can get so much out of these classes, of course, and it is an essential part of the morning programs. But it's not the same as scrutinizing, studying through the Srimad Bhagavatam. So when one studies through Srimad Bhagavatam, and this can also happen during Bhagavatam class, but especially when one is studying through Srimad Bhagavatam, you're not only getting these tidbits of transcendental information, you're actually getting association of the devotees who you are reading about. These devotees will jump right out of the page and tell you exactly what it is that you should be doing. So I'm going to give an example. I have window right here. Okay. So I'm going to click here, Bhagavatam, and we're just going to look at the titles of these chapters, and I'm just going to go through and so for example, when we talk about Narada Muni, we learn from Narada Muni that for example, we learn the power of honoring the remnants of Mahaprasad. We learn the potency of inquiring submissively and hearing from the Bhaktivedantas, right? When we read about Ashvatthama being punished, the son of Drona punished, we're learning about mercy, compassion, prayers of Queen Kunti. That's a great one. We learn that sometimes it's better for us to be faced with adverse situations because they actually, help us focus more on Krishna. So I'm going to pause on that one for a second, because most of us, for example, we don't have calamitous lives, right? We may say we do, but if we say that, usually we're being pretty dramatic. When we compare our lives to the Pandavas, the Kunti, we may have annoying lives or somewhat unfortunate situations that happen from time to time, but we wouldn't really call them calamities, right? We haven't been stripped of our titles and our kingdoms and forced to live in the forest for several years and had various attempts on our lives. We don't have those kind of calamities. So one may say, what do we actually learn from Queen Kunti though? Like, because how can we even relate? Our lives aren't like that. But when we're going through this section, say for example, and this is just an example of many different other examples that you can give, is say for example, we get annoyed in traffic jams, right? Not many people like traffic jams, right? But for some reason, let's say sometime in our devotional career, we heard someone that when they're going through an unfortunate situation in their life, they say something like, "Oh, Krishna," right? And it's kind of a strange thing to hear, because it's almost like you're taking this position of you're almost scolding Krishna for putting you in that situation. For me, it was actually, I heard a god brother say, he stubbed his toe and he said, "Oh, Krishna," right? And like I said, it seems strange at first because it's almost like you're scolding Krishna, and it's not his fault, it was your karma. So what are you scolding Krishna for? What are you blaming him for? But the fact that he said that he was saying Krishna, he was remembering Krishna, that's the positive part, right? So let's say that, you get in a traffic jam, and because you heard a god brother say, "Oh, Krishna," when he stubbed his toe, you think, "Oh, Krishna, now, I mean, it's inconvenience. And now I'm going to make it, by the time I get home, it's going to be late. And then all the duties that I have to do at home, I'm going to, it's going to take me much longer. And then I'm not going to get a good rest. And then tomorrow is going to be even worse. And, we do this. But at least if we're thinking of Krishna, then we can use that as an opportunity to turn the situation around, right? We could say, okay, this is unfortunate for all of these different reasons, but it's giving me the opportunity to think of Krishna. So if I have time right now in my car in this traffic jam to meditate on Krishna, I can use this opportunity where there's no other distractions, because as soon as I get home, I got to do all these other duties. And so I can actually use this, although it is annoying, it's an opportunity that I can have to just focus on Krishna, right? And so if we do that, then our attitude changes. We welcome these things instead of thinking, oh, Krishna, why am I in this situation? We're thinking, oh, Krishna, thank you for giving me this opportunity to focus on you, right? So it's not the same kind of calamities that Queen Kunti goes through, but it's a similar experience where when we're annoyed, we're thinking of Krishna. Whereas if we're driving home and everything's going well, we could be thinking of so many different things. Our mind can be distracted by, whatever we're driving by, the scenery. Maybe the person next to us has their window down and they're playing a song that we used to like in our past, and we start singing along, whatever the case may be. But who does that benefit, right? But the traffic jam actually might benefit you because now you're thinking of Krishna, even though at first it's a strange way to think of Krishna, but it can be turned around, right? So in these moments, whatever makes us think of Krishna, we should embrace those, because the other moments where we're not, those, we're just being distracted. We're only thinking of ourselves, and we're not actually becoming Krishna conscious. So we learn that from her, and she'll come off the page and tell us this, and tell us how to relate that situation to our lives, because we don't have the same calamity that she did, and we're certainly not wishing for it, right? But we can see that. Then the passing away of Bhishma. I'm not going to do this for all of them because I see we're running out of time, but passing away of Bhishma Dev. He'll come off the page and tell us that even in circumstances and situations that are beyond our control, if due to upholding Dharma and upholding the promise that we made, even if we end up on the wrong side of history, we still have the opportunity to serve Krishna properly. It doesn't matter what material situations or unfortunate events took place. We can always serve Krishna, and we can always get a favorable outcome. So we can go through the departure of Krishna for Dwara. See, these are all great too. When Krishna is leaving, when the Pandavas retire timely, a world without Krishna is not worth living in. So for the Pandavas, it literally meant, okay, now Krishna has left this planet, so now we are also going to leave. So they took Vanaprastha and they left because there's nothing else here. So for us, that's not what it means. It means if there's an activity that we're doing, right, and we're doing it in a service to Krishna, if at some point we're no longer seeing the connection to Krishna, we see that, oh, I'm only doing this activity for myself, then one has to give up that activity or figure out how to do that activity while thinking of Krishna again. Krishna has to be there, otherwise there's no point in that activity. These are the things that these devotees will come off of the page and show us how to apply these things in our lives. So that's the result of having just a little bit of sincerity. Krishna and his devotees will fan that tiny spark of sincerity and come and explain to us how the situations in their lives actually apply to us in our lives, so that we can also focus on Krishna, right, to become Krishna conscious. So that's the first thing, an example. So the second thing I wanted to do is explain how we can cultivate and increase our level of qualification to become a proper recipient, right? So this is a trick. This took us actually a bit to figure out. there are a couple schools in Mayapur that I volunteer for, and it's all curriculum development, teaching Bhagavatam. And so one of the schools that I volunteer for, the Bhaktivedanta Academy, we started going through Srimad Bhagavatam about 18 years ago, because we figured everyone that's there, all the people that are there, they've already read and understood the Bhagavad Gita. They know that we're meant to surrender to Krishna. And so let's just go right into Srimad Bhagavatam. Everyone already did their Bhakti Shastri. So we started going through Srimad Bhagavatam. And we did basically 4 years. We went through, and we found that we were getting very basic questions. Topics would come up in Srimad Bhagavatam, but we were getting questions that were on the level of Bhagavad Gita, which that's fine. Whenever you have an inquiry, then you should inquire about it, whatever it is. But we saw that we weren't really delving into the subject of Srimad Bhagavatam because we were still dealing with the doubts that are addressed in Bhagavad Gita. So we said, okay, we got to go back. We got to go back through Bhagavad Gita. But we didn't just go through Bhagavad Gita once, right? So we did it once. We went through the standard Bhakti Shastri curriculum. But then we said, okay, Srila Prabhupada also wrote this essay, Analysis of Bhagavad Gita, where he goes deeper into the theme of Gita, right? So there's a systematic study, but then there's the thematic study. Divides it in Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojana, right? We also have these great books by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, where he has Sri Tattva Sutra, which he does that same thing. It's a thematic study of Sri Isopanishad. So just in case you go through the casual study of Sri Isopanishad, but you want to even go deeper, then you read Sri Tattva Sutra, and you get to go deeper. And then there's also Bhakti Aloka, which is Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's commentary on some of the verses of Upadikshāmrita, right? And so again, like this, and Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur also has these thematic studies. It's called Dasamul, where he takes Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojana. He basically divides it into 10 categories. And then he shows how these different works are following these categories, how they go through. So it gives a deeper understanding. So essentially what it does is, when we study Bhagavad Gita, the conclusion of Bhagavad Gita, Sarva Dharman Parityajya, we should surrender to Krishna. Then when we do a deeper study of Bhagavad Gita, not only do we know that we are to surrender to Krishna, but then we get these tools, right? We get these tools to better understand how to apply the instructions that are given in Srimad Bhagavatam, right? Now, when we have those tools, then after we've developed those, of course, this is all through submissive inquiries and a service attitude. This isn't through scholastic prowess, intellectual capability, any of that, as mentioned in today's verse and today's purport. When we do that through submissive inquiry, service attitude, coming through disciplic succession, reading the works of Srila Prabhupada and the other acharyas, and having a facilitator who is just repeating what is being said by these personalities, then we have these tools, and then we're ready to fully, or not fully, more deeply, I should say, because you can never fully understand these things because it's spiritual, there's no end. So more deeply appreciate Srimad Bhagavatam. So after going through, we did then 4 years worth of going through the basic philosophy, Bhagavad Gita, Sri Upanishad, Nectar of Devotion, Nectar of Instruction. We also touched on the Pancharatra, because Pancharatra shows you how to practically apply these things, not just to be able to intellectually have a conversation about these things, or to repeat or recite verses or things like that, but actually how to apply these things in our lives. Pancharatra teaches us that. And we also go through Laghu Bhagavatamrita and Brihad Bhagavatamrita and Jaiva Dharma. So it also shows us a glimpse of what the goal is. We see Gopakumar's ascension to the spiritual world, and how, he's in Vaikuntha, the perfect place, yet he's still not quite satisfied because of that particular mood that he has as a Gopa. And so we can see, all these things, we get all these tools, we get, these glimpses of the prayojana to see, okay, this is what we're doing this for, this is what we hope to achieve. And then we started Bhagavatam again, and then we saw it was the same crew, but the questions were now on the level of Srimad Bhagavatam. And like I said, if you're studying Srimad Bhagavatam and you have questions that are on the Gita level, that's fine. You should ask them, no problem. But when studying Bhagavatam, it's good to have those tools ready beforehand when you actually go to study. Because statistically, and this is an unfortunate statistic, but most devotees actually haven't read, if you take all the people who say I'm an aspiring devotee of Krishna, haven't actually read through Srimad Bhagavatam. So statistically, if you are going to get through Srimad Bhagavatam, you're only going to do it once. So you should have the proper tools to be able to get as much from it as you can. Now, if one goes through it properly once, statistically, you're going to want to go through it again, because it's natural to once you have a taste for it, to actually keep going through. But if you just go through casually once, which most people don't even get an opportunity to do, you're not necessarily going to be inclined to go through again. You're going to, sort of check it off and say, okay, I've done that. That's been achieved. But the more you approach it with this proper mood, submissive inquiries and service attitude, the more that spark gets fanned, the more we cultivate and increase our level of qualification to be a proper recipient, and the more we get out of it. And so we'll end up reading through Bhagavatam multiple times, 10, 20 times, if we actually get that taste. So these tools are very important to have. So just a quick sum up, because we're getting to that time. So we have to understand the qualifications of both the listener and the speaker. What are those qualifications? We have to understand the appropriate transactions that take place between the listener and the speaker. And we have to approach it with the right mood. Then we have to become qualified for whichever position we're trying to fill, right? If we're trying to hear, we have to make sure that we're qualified hearers. If we're trying to speak, we have to make sure we're qualified speakers. The qualified speakers means that we've heard in the cyclic succession, and we are reasonably conveying the message of the Vedas to the hearer. And the hearer means that one should be eager to hear, one should be sincere to attain spiritual knowledge, and one should be submissive in their inquiries and have a mood of service, right? And we're reminded, especially in today's purport, that this isn't done by scholarship or any other intellectual or physical prowess, but it is done through the guru-disciple relationship, right? So that's how Krishna gauges our sincerity. He doesn't say, well, let's see, he went through university, he got very good marks, he's able to memorize so many verses, he knows some Sanskrit, yada, yada, yada. No, it's about sincerity. He gauges our sincerity, and then he rewards us accordingly. Oh, I forgot the one part. When I forgot to mention, so I mentioned that the Bhakti Vaibhava course was canceled, and I became very upset by it back in 2005. But then also the other course that I was going to take, the one that I was going to cultivate my art, that one also got canceled. And I didn't care one bit about it. It was a little inconvenient because although I got a refund for the course, I couldn't get a refund for the plane ticket. But I didn't care. It didn't bother me. And when I saw that didn't bother me, but I was bothered by the fact that I was inconvenienced when I couldn't study Shastra, that made me understand, okay, I at least have some sort of priority straight in life. And it was, of course, all due to Krishna's mercy. That had nothing to do with anything of mine. So Krishna gauges that sincerity and then rewards us accordingly. If he sees that that's what we're willing to do, then he rewards us. So a good example of that is the Aborigine lady who had mangoes, and she brought them into Nanda Maharaj's village, and so she was trading. So Krishna, he grabbed a handful of grains, and he's just a small baby at this point, so a handful of grains isn't very much. And as he's walking, as babies do, they don't walk in a linear sense or a steady sense. They sort of stumble around. And so as he's walking, he's dropping these grains all over the place. And so he gives this lady like just a few grains and she gives him this entire basket of mangoes because, he won her heart over, right? And so Krishna walks away, and then all of a sudden the lady has this basket full of jewels, valuable jewels in gold, right? That's Krishna's way of reciprocating, right? It seems from our point of view that Krishna is like really tipping the scale in our favor. But for him, no, that's just how he rewards his devotees. He sees the smallest bit of sincerity and he rewards it greatly. Also, the story, we don't have time to say it now, but I say the story many times of Sudama Brahmana, how he reciprocated with him. And he didn't even see that as a fair reciprocation, right? He thought that Sudama Brahmana was getting the short end of the stick. He wasn't getting enough for, for those couple grains of, again, just a couple grains of rice, all right? So with this knowledge of understanding the qualifications of the speaker, the hearer, the relationship between the two and the mood, with that knowledge, we can properly cultivate and increase our level of qualification to be a bona fide speaker or hearer. We have to understand that. And we should never rely on material prowess, resourcefulness, etc. Okay, but always rely on the process established by Sri Krishna, which is the guru-disciple relationship, submissive inquiries for the hearer and the service attitude, and for the speaker, it should be just repeating that which we have learned from the authority without changing it, without adulterating it in any way, and giving it to the disciple or the hearer in a reasonable way. One need not be scholastic, intellectual, etc., in order to do either. So I've gone over, and I apologize for that. But let's see if there are any questions or comments or corrections or anything like that.
It's a very nice class, Prabhu. Covered all the chapters of the Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita. It's very, yes, like you said, Bhagavad Gita reading page by page also, it doesn't help. For me, I don't know whether I sit for reading, I might be drowsed or something happens to me, my mind goes somewhere. But this devotee association, mainly, everyday morning, it's very interesting. We all come to this class in the morning. A lot of devotees come and sit here. That is the nectar of Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita. We tasted it.
Mm.
So day by day, we listen to everything, just like you're saying your story, how you went to Vrindavan, how you went to Bhakti Shastri courses and everything. Not many people can do like that. Is that right? But you tried and you did, and you didn't leave it, and you did voluntary service. That is something. But I see all these, how Kunti, she prayed Krishna, and then how Pandavas did it, how Arjuna, he was just hesitating to fight, but how Krishna, what Krishna told him, how he thought, this is not body, this is a soul. So that is the main thing. We are not body, we are soul. Mm. And Bhagavad Gita also, lots of things it tells us. It's very important to understand what we're going through. Like, for example, we are going through second chapter in the beginning. And of course, we're doing second chapter here. And I was taking another class after a little bit further. I couldn't understand anything. I told that Prabhu, I'm sorry, I'm not able to understand this. That was very tough to understand. It's not everyday, we can easily follow this. So that's very, very important for us these classes, the more and more, every chapter in Bhagavatam, it says what is our life, how we have to go through our life. It gives us a lesson. It's very important. It's a nectar. Once you taste, you cannot leave it. So I felt so much, and thank you very much for your nice class, Prabhu. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, and I should clarify that one doesn't need to go to Vrindavan or Mayapur to study Shastra. It certainly helps. There are so many different resources, especially nowadays online. There are different ways to do it, but the important thing is that we have to somehow conjure up just a drop of sincerity, and then take very, very, very good care of that drop, and allow Krishna to just expand that, right? And just if we do that, then somehow the situation will arise where we can go through and study Shastra in the association.
So that reminds me, the Saturday I was climbing that mountain, little mountain. I went halfway through. I couldn't go. I turned back and I said, halfway, I went already. What should I do? Whether I had to go halfway up or halfway down. That thought of me, I said, okay, I am doing this in this life, this Bhagavatam or Bhagavad Gita. I should be going back. I had to try and learn what I'm doing. And that very, very much interest, it took me up to the mountain, and then I just prayed Jagannath, Lord Jagannath, and I had very good time, and I came back. And everybody was saying that, how could you climb up? I don't know. Actually speaking, I went 3-4 times to that temple. I never climbed up. I just sat at the information center, the downstairs, down. But the Saturday was the day with some devotees, your hand and everything, that it took me up. And the same way, I was thinking of Jagannath, and I was thinking of that. All the way home, I was behind Jagannath's car, and I was going to, I came home. And he was ahead of me. And he was guiding. So I thought that way, I took it mentally that way, is guiding. So here also in Bhagavad Gita, it says, like you're saying that what you should do, that tadvidi pranipatena pariprasnena sevaya. So we should ask questions, we should know eagerly, and then only we will know what is that Bhagavatam or Bhagavad Gita. So these are the experiences. I feel that each and every step, I feel that, like you said, oh Krishna, when something calamity happens, oh Krishna, like Kunti Devi prayed with Krishnaya Vasudevaya. So those are the things, we have to, each and every moment we should think of the Lord.
Yeah.
And not that, only in calamities, oh, why did you give me this calamity, Krishna? No. It should have been more dangerous, but you saved me with this.
Yeah.
That is the thing I had. Thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you. Kalpesh Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Humble obeisances, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Prabhuji, I wanted to understand like our essence of Vedas or our scripture is to understand Krishna, and 24/7 we have to remember Krishna, right? So knowing that if everyone, like I'm endeavoring it, I'm not there. So in that process, while we do it, there are dualities, right, in the world, and there are several varieties, kinds of temperament, peoples, philosophy, and in this world, when we are living with that engagement with them. In some or other services, we are indirectly or directly using it through them, So how do we, like, there are sins, and then there are not sins, but there are also good deeds. How do we really understand Krishna in particularly when when the authority is to understand Krishna, but at the same time there is an opposites existing at the same time. There are people inimical towards you, and even though we repeat the same sentences and words from Shastras, but still we face so much oppression and oppositions and like a rejection. I mean, in that way, what happens is like sometime we don't know what to do in that case. Like it's very difficult to know like how to react, or do I need to say something, or do I not need to react to it? Like, what should I do it, in that point? Because if I don't say something, then I'm not telling the truth. I'm not like we go by the 17th chapter, right? You should always talk of beneficial to others, right? And your intent should be always benefiting others. At the same time, it should be truth, which is coming from Guru, Shastras, or sadhus. And see the consequences, that a consequence should be pleasing. That is the method of preaching, right? When we do. So we have to always think about those three parameters. But even though we say the truth, even though we say the right words from the repeating from the Guru, Shastras, and sadhus, still it not necessarily it is always going to be a favorable thing, And then the question comes is, I just said the truth, and I was representing Krishna or Guru or anybody, right? In that case, then still I face the reactions, and I understand that it is our results also of our karma. But it is very difficult when we are doing this spiritual activity and we see that also happening in that, So I wanted to know the best behavior is like I came to this conclusion. Correct me if I'm wrong. I came to be in the mood of compassion, because that is the way you can really win this world. There is no other way in my thinking. Like if there is no compassion, right, and friendliness towards others, then it's very difficult to because if I am going to say wrong to somebody who is inimical, then there is going to be a lot of challenge I have to face.
Yeah, compassion needs to be there. We find that as we go through Shastra and we understand how these devotees in Srimad Bhagavatam, when we see them properly dealing with others, we ourselves also become more expert in reading the situation. Because there's one thing to just repeat what's in Shastra, but then the other is to know when which things should be said, right? And these devotees show us that. And so compassion is an important factor there. But if we see that what we're doing when we're, if we see, especially if a pattern forms, is that if we're just relaying Shastra to someone and they're getting upset by it, then we should understand that, okay, the goal isn't actually being met, because I'm not trying to cause them more distress. I'm trying to, help. So then you try a different method then, right? So if hearing Shastra agitates them, then try prasad, right? Or if they can appreciate kirtan, whatever they can appreciate, focus on that. So we become expert in that. We start seeing what is actually obviously kirtan is always beneficial to anyone, whether they know it or not. Even if they're agitated, that's good. But we should also be sensitive to what people are getting out of it, and try to, if we can, try to become expert in presenting it in such a way that's not going to agitate them.
Yeah,
that's the message out. But with that, yeah. So again, like you said, if there's compassion there, then one is more likely to be able to do that. But it's learning from these great devotees in Srimad Bhagavatam how and when to apply these particular things. because sometimes you have to speak sweetly and sometimes you have to speak a little rougher, right? We learn from Vidura when he's speaking to his brother toward the end, you know. Now generally he wouldn't speak to his brother like that, but now was the time when he had to learn that lesson, and it was the right thing to do, and so he did it. You're living like a dog. You're eating the scraps of beating. Like, come on, this isn't how you should end your life. And so then he went and he took Bonaparte. So
What I have learned, saying no to others means it is hurting their ego, right? And if it hurts their ego, even though it is in the right intent, people don't like to listen no, and they don't like to get corrected, or they don't like to change according to, because we are not saying you have to believe me, what my statement of words which is coming from my mouth. I have to also take shelter at the authority of my scriptures, and you have to also take the authority of the scriptures. If we both take the authority of the scripture, it's not my belief versus your belief, because I can concoct something in my mind which is not really a truth, but at the same, what is my shelter, you know? And when we try to represent and it hurts somebody's ego, you know, and that is where the relationship gets disturbed, and then that created because our as a devotee and as a Vaishnava, we are not supposed to create a disturbance too in the society with any activities or any actions. That is also a principle which was being always, because Chaitanya Mahaprabhuji clearly told us, like, we should, even though people don't respect us, we should still respect everyone, and we should treat everyone as a Vaishnava. That is the highest principle. I know we cannot directly, means it's good to meditate on it, but that is what our highest goal is, right? To reach, like, through our sadhana, basically. So that is what I'm saying. Like, people like don't like to hear no, or they don't like to hear change of something, you know. They don't want to really see that way. And in that case, we have the engagements with them. We are connected, and we cannot really say. So I always see this way, like, it is my internal journey. I have to change all the time. But even though doing that, sometimes it's not so much helpful, you know. So I am saying, okay, it's a reaction to what my karmas are. That is the best way of thinking at that time. So, but it still disturbs, you know, inside. It still disturbs. That is where, like I don't know which way we have to go. It's terrible when somebody goes through that.
It is, yeah. But as we make progress on the spiritual path, we become more and more expert. And not only do we start understanding where and when to apply which particular methods of devotional service, but we also become more detached from the result, because Krishna is in charge of the result. It's not us. So we'll do the best we know how to do according to what is given in Shastra. And as I said, over time, we become more and more expert at doing that, and we start making better decisions. And then we also just understand that it's all in Krishna's hands anyway. So if I'm feeling that I'm the cause of something, then that means I think I'm independent from Krishna, because Krishna is the supreme cause. So I just do as I was instructed in Shastra, and over time I'll become more expert in it, and I'll commit fewer and fewer mistakes. But in the meantime, we also have to leave the results up to Krishna, because they're up to him anyway. We just have to actually acknowledge it and act accordingly.
Prabhu, even Krishna said to Arjuna, he always kept on saying that you need to go do the war. He explained everything, and he showed his Viswarupa also. And then he said, okay, do whatever you want. I told you all these things. Now you decide yourself what happened. So that's all. You just tell, but don't change yourself. And you just tell and then leave it at that. That is the idea.
So
But
probably understanding Krishna would mean that even the opposites, which like even the sin activities is going on in the society, like how do we, I mean, it's very difficult to accept it that way, but
Well, it's not. It's actually quite obvious once we actually see it, because that's a very common misunderstanding, is that if God is all powerful and all loving, then how can there be evil, right? Because if he's all loving, then there shouldn't be evil. And since there is evil, that means he can't be all powerful, because he's not powerful enough to overcome that. And if he is all powerful, then he's not all loving, because, then he wouldn't allow such things. And we come up with this with our material logic. It's not based on Shastra. But actually, if we look at it from his perspective, we are individuals, right? And he loves each of us. And he wants us to have the option whether we actually engage in his service or not. Because if it's not an option, if it's not a choice, if it's not something that you're actually doing because you want to, then there's nothing there to relish. It's just you're a part of a machine. There's no individuality, there's no choice, there's no love, right? So there has to be at least this option to not do it, to commit sin, to go against what Krishna wants. And that all happens here in the material world, right? So the fact that evil and good both exist is just a show of his compassion, of how much he loves us, because he loves us so much that he allows us to temporarily try our hand at taking his position, being God here in the material world. And everyone's doing it, right? That's what we're all here for. So that's why this sin is all happening, and it's all happening under his control. And nothing's happening to, there's suffering, psychological suffering that's going on, but the soul isn't suffering. The soul can't be cut to pieces. It can't be burned by fire. It can't be moistened by water. So sure, we're going through, but we're learning these lessons, right? But really, for the soul, there's no harm being done, right? So once we see this big picture, then we're no longer concerned with that material logic of, well, if God, he can't be all powerful and all loving, because otherwise the material world would be like this. No, we see that the material world is like this because he is all loving and all powerful. He's able to give us a situation where we can do the impossible. The impossible means be independent from him. It's impossible to be independent from him. We're part of him, right? And so when we misused our free will to try to be independent from him, the only real option is to be independent from Krishna, is to not exist, right? So Krishna, all powerful that he is, made another option. He gave us this illusion of the material world where we can pretend that we are independent from him, and we can act as controllers and enjoyers, and we can do that for as long as we need, until we actually figure out that, oh, okay, no, I'm not actually the controller or the enjoyer, because Krishna is, and I'm just part and parcel. And he gives us as much time as we need. So that shows his compassion. The fact that we're able to do all these different sins, and he's very patient and waiting for us to come to our senses. Well, that's a bad turn of phrase, because senses are material, but come to, our transcendental senses. So that actually just shows his compassion, shows that he is loving, right? The same thing that people are saying that shows that God's not loving, it's actually what shows that he is loving. We just have to see it from the correct perspective. But Prabhu, we're going to have to end now because my battery's starting to die and we're also over time. But thank you very much for the questions. Hare Krishna, Bhakti David. Everyone else, thank you very much for joining. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. And it looks like I'll see you all next week.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.